Welcome to my kitchen. Welcome back to Ridgehaven Homestead. This is a video of normalizing cooking in our kitchen. The kitchen's not all cleaned up. We're going to be doing Friday afternoon cooking for tomorrow, and so I am going to be making a vegan lasagna, which requires a vegan cottage cheese, tofu cottage cheese, which I'll be making. I'm also going to be throwing some vegan yogurt into the crock pot so that can get going, and then just doing several other things in the kitchen. So keep up with me. It's not scripted, it's not pretty, it's just real life cooking along with me. One of my favorite things to do when making yogurt is to use the leftover yogurt from the last time to start the next batch. And so I make yogurt in different ways, just depending on what I'm doing at the time. But today it's going into my small crock pot. This one I recently got. It's just 2 quarts. It's a cute little baby crock pot. And I am going to get it started in here, and then I'm going to transfer it into the dehydrator to finish the process. I have never done it this way. I noticed that when I was drying my herbs that it had a yogurt setting, and so why not? Why not give it a try? I've never done yogurt at the optimal temperature of 115 consistently, and I really would like to find out how it turns out when I do that. This milk is already sterilized. This is shelf-stable, organic, unsweetened soy milk, and so it doesn't have to be sterilized. Normally when you have a milk, you have to heat it up to 180, let it cool down, and then add your culture. I'm not doing that because I'm taking it directly from the carton. However, I am putting it into a non-sterile crock pot, and so I am going to at least heat this up to where it is steaming. I've got my crock pot pre-warming, and this is room temperature, so I'm just going to put this over there and let it heat for a little while I do other things. I'm going to keep it on high, and that way it won't take too long to get this up to steaming temperature. This is what's left of my old yogurt. It is just, I would say, a little bit less than a cup in this jar. And so that is going to provide me with plenty of starter culture for my next batch. On the menu today, or on the docket, is lasagna, and if I have time, I'm going to bake some cookies because I know my guys would enjoy that. One of my guys is out of town for 2 weeks, and that is very strange. He's the baby, and he's never been gone this long, and he's actually never been gone away from home before with only himself. So yeah, a little strange, but we're making it. So I made some overnight cracked wheat cereal that I just added some coconut milk to and some raisins, and that is in the fridge now waiting for when we eat it in the morning. I've got the beans in the crock pot, which are cooking. They have been cooking for about 4.5 hours, and they've got a little bit more to go, and I'm hoping that by the time the guys get home they will be cooked. Let's start with the vegan lasagna. This was a spur of the moment thing to make the lasagna, so I'm going with what I have, which happens to be the tail ends of 2 boxes of lasagna noodles. So there's like 6 noodles in this one, and There's like 9 or 10 in this. That's going to be plenty of noodles. First thing I want to do is grease my pan, and I just use a little bit of olive oil in the bottom and use a pastry brush to spread it around. One thing I should tell you is there are 1,000 different ways to make regular lasagna, and there's just as many ways to make vegan lasagna. Now, many times when I've made lasagna, I follow a certain recipe, which gives me a recipe for the cheese, which is a blended cheese sauce that has a base of cashews or almonds or sometimes sunflower seeds. I'm not using that today because I happen to have a stock of vegan cheese from the store, and so that just makes it easier. I don't think it makes it healthier. I think healthier is actually when you make your own, but this is awfully convenient and it tastes pretty good. So there's many ways to do it. Now, I like to start out by making a tofu cottage cheese. Tofu cottage cheese. And once again, there are lots of different ways to make tofu cottage cheese. I happen to do this very simple version when I am making a lasagna. This also works for eating with different things, like anything you would eat cottage cheese with. So I'm taking 2 boxes of 16-ounce tofu. I always try to find the non-GMO soybeans. GMO just means genetically modified organism. I drain them off, put them in my bowl. And then comes the smashing. I just take my tofu and I smash it up real good. And this is a fairly firm tofu. Some tofus are a lot softer. So, I'll tell you what, if it's a little firmer, it's a little harder to smash, and sometimes you just have to use your hands. I always refer to this as tofu cottage cheese. It's actually more the consistency of a tofu ricotta, so it's more of that smaller texture. Once you get it all smashed up, you're going to add your seasonings. To this mixture, you are going to add 2 teaspoons of salt. This happens to be the Himalayan pink salt. I like to add a teaspoon of Italian seasoning. You don't have to. It's just because it's going into lasagna. I'm adding that, and you can afford to be generous with this. Okay, a teaspoon of garlic powder. I'm going heavier on the garlic powder because I happen to be out of onion powder. Normally, I would put 2 teaspoons in of onion powder, or even more if I decided to. Okay, a couple of tablespoons of nutritional yeast flakes. And then you just want to take this and stir it up well. You're just going to combine these flavors. Okay, at any point in this game, you can add about a 1/2 cup of vegan mayonnaise. I happen to be using this Follow Your Heart brand because I got it from our co-op. I don't have any special ties with this. If I did not have the vegan mayonnaise, then I would make my own cashew cheese sauce and mix it in to give this tofu ricotta a little bit of creaminess. Just mix that in. You can add, if you don't want to use the mayonnaise, you can add some kind of a vegan ranch dressing. You can add, if you have heard of Vegan Valley, which makes a delicious Alfredo sauce, you can add that, or even the nacho sauce if you prefer that. Basically, you just want something that's going to give this moisture. If you don't have any of those things, you can add some plant-based milk, but I really like the creaminess of something that is a little bit fuller in fat. Okay, that's all there is to it. It comes out with a thick texture. It's not exactly like cottage cheese or ricotta. It's more similar to ricotta. This is delicious. I will eat this on toast with avocado or tomato. I will eat it in a bowl with some salt or pesto. I will eat it with anything. It's actually also really good if you want to do like a really fast pasta dish. Cook some spaghetti, put some tomato sauce on it, and then put some of this on top. It's really yummy. The next thing we're going to do is get our pan ready for the assembly of the lasagna. I've already oiled the pan. Now it's just a matter of assembling the lasagna similar to how you would make your lasagna normally. Now, I don't know if I do this one thing differently than you would normally do, but I do not cook my lasagna noodles. I just add additional water and liquid to the pan, which soaks it up, and it's never been a problem. It's actually quite delicious. So today I'm using a plant-based bolognese. I don't even know how to say that, or that kind of sauce. It's a spaghetti sauce, and I may need to add more spaghetti or more tomato sauce to it, but I got this at a pretty good price, and so that's what I'm using. I finally got that lid off, good gracious. I am going to open a small can of tomato sauce because I have a feeling we're gonna need more than just this jar. I feel like they're making the jars smaller than they used to. This is 23.9 ounces, and they used to be 28 ounces or 32. So they keep shrinking the jars and keeping the price the same or higher. That's how they do it. I just happen to be using a very generic tomato sauce, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to pour some of that in the bottom of my pan to get it going so that it doesn't stick. I'm just going to pour the whole thing in. From there, I'm just going to assemble the lasagna like I normally would, or like you normally would, using raw noodles. This just makes it a lot easier for assembling it, and you don't have to worry about that cooking time. I've been doing this for the last 10 years or so, and it's always worked out pretty well to make my noodles fit. The process is going to go like this. I'm going to layer the tofu mixture on top of the noodles, and then I'm going to put a layer of sauce, and then I'm going to put a layer of vegan cheese. Normally I would use some type of vegan shredded cheese like a mozzarella, and I don't have any of that right now, so I do have the mozzarella slices, and so I'm just going to open this up. I'm going to lay the slices in between the noodles, and it works quite well. I'm also going to be adding some Italian seasoning in amongst the layers, and then I have another type of vegan cheese that is also from Follow Your Heart, and this is an American, and the combination is really quite tasty. So that is what we're doing. So just do this like you would your ricotta. Get it nice and smooth. And I don't expect it really matters which order you do your things in. I'm just gonna do it like this. I'm gonna put the sauce, and this has some plant-based crumbles in it, which are actually pretty good. Now, when I get a sauce that has the burger crumbles in it and they're plant-based, I always try to make sure that they are made from non-GMO ingredients because that's important to us. And yeah, a lot of the soybeans are genetically modified, so we just really try hard to avoid those. I made some of this lasagna last weekend and took it to a potluck, and there were some little boys that were just going wild over it, and they didn't know what plant-based or vegan really means. They just knew that it tasted good. It makes it a little more challenging in some ways to have to separate these, but actually it's really easy to get good coverage, so there you go. Next, we're going to do more noodles, and so on and so on. You get the picture. I got all the layers done and I still had just a couple of noodles left, so I figured, hey, why not just use them and layer them in. So I'm finishing out with a layer of this vegan mozzarella, which it looks like I'm gonna have to open another package for 2.5 more slices. Just for the record, if this vegan cheese had not been basically dirt cheap off of our co-op a little while back, I would be doing a different alternative. Vegan cheese slices and shreds can be pretty pricey, so I would probably just make it stretch a little farther or do something like I mentioned, the cheese sauce, making that myself. This is very difficult to get unstuck. Here we go. But we were able to pick up some of this for a very good price, and so I have a stock. It's not going to last forever, but in the meantime, I'm using what we have. All right, I'd like to finish with a layer of Italian seasoning. Now, the important part here that we need to remember is because we are using uncooked noodles, we have to add additional water. I ended up using 4 of these little bitty cans of sauce, and so I've put a little bit of water in the end of each of them to get the rest of the tomato sauce out. But we're going to add additional water, and you just have to eyeball this. Basically, you want this to look like it's not dry. And so I think we need a little more. A normal lasagna that with the cooked noodles this would be a fine consistency, but since the noodles are not cooked, we are adding a good amount of water. And at first it will hang around on the top, and that's okay. You just kind of have to work it in so that when this starts to bake, it starts to get bubbly. The noodles will absorb that water, and then that is what you're going to want for your lasagna. Normally, I would say add about 1/2 cup of water, but because it seemed like we already had a sort of dry sauce, I added at least 1 cup, and it's okay. This looks floaty and it looks kind of bad, but it's okay. Just trust the process. Now all I'm going to do is cover it with foil, bake it at 350 for an hour, and check to see if my lasagna noodles are tender. Easy peasy. Now that the lasagna is baking, let's check on that yogurt to see what the progress is on that. we have what seems to be a hot crock pot. It's pretty hot. When I put my finger in, it is enough to burn it, not scald it, but it's hot. So I'm going to let that cool down. If I had a thermometer in there, I would let it get down to 115, and why not? I have a thermometer. Let me check and find out what the thermometer is saying. Okay, let's just see. Here I have this candy thermometer. So I've turned the crock pot off. I'm going to predict that this will be about 175 to 180. Okay, it turns out I was wrong. Big surprise. The temperature of this milk that I've heated is hanging right around 125. So that is, it's a lot less than I thought it was. And I think that is a perfectly safe temperature so that I can add the yogurt leftovers and stir that in. I'm just taking what's left in my, usually it's about a half a cup, but this looks like more close to a cup or 3/4, and I'm just pouring this in here. Gonna give it a stir. This is not a good spatula for this. Okie doke. You always want to smell your yogurt and make sure it's still good. Don't put it in if it has a bad smell. I've been eating out of this jar. I mean, not like eating with a spoon. I've been using this jar and filling up, putting smoothies and things. So I had a, I was pretty sure that it hadn't gone bad. But occasionally, if you keep it too long, it will. You just want to stir that in, and this is taking the place of any other cultures or probiotics. Sometimes I will make yogurt by using probiotic capsules, but it's so much easier when you just save what you had and go from there. So I am going to take this out of the crock pot. Crock pot's not going to be used anymore. At this point, I could do one of two things, probably one of many things. I could close this up really tight and wrap it in a thick towel, and it would maintain this temperature for many hours because the bulk of the ceramic crock pot and everything, it would keep warm for quite a while. But like I told you, I'm putting it in the dehydrator. I've got it out there running at 95, so I'm going to take those herbs out, and I know they're done anyway, and then I'm going to just run this in there. We just have this dehydrator out in this sun porch area because it keeps the heat out here and not in the house, which is much better. And it's a little bit noisy, it rattles a bit. I had dehydrated these clovers I had taken them out this morning, but they were not as crunchy as I wanted them to be. And so I put them back in, and now they are nice and crisp. So here I have it with its lid on. I didn't really see any point of putting a different lid on it. And there we go. I'm gonna close it up and turn it on. Raising bread takes place at 110. Making yogurt takes place at 115. Normally, I'll just be honest with you, normally I'm not going to be using the dehydrator for purposes like this because we're off grid and we have to be very conservative with our battery use. But on a day like this when it's sunny and the batteries are fully charged, there's no problem using the solar energy. If it was a cloudy day and it was stormy and it was going to be 3 more days of rain, I would wrap it in a towel and do it that way, or I would put it in the oven. So there's lots of options. I've never used a yogurt maker. I know when we were younger, my mom had one and she would make yogurt and it was pretty awesome. I was pretty young at that point, but I do remember her making it and it was delicious. Turn this thing on at 115 and get out of here. The rattle that this had before has stopped, so I think it was this this lid was rattling a little bit. But with these trays sitting on top of it, it keeps it a lot quieter. So that's a good thing. Let's put this back in the jars. Unfortunately, I used one of these jars for my tea, so I'm gonna have to find something else that these can go in. Moving right along with what we're cooking in the kitchen. Next, I'm gonna make some cookies for the guys. They like chocolate chip cookies, and I am going to add in some of these stevia sweetened butterscotch morsels. And I'm doing this the lazy way. I'm not gonna make a gazillion cookies. I'm gonna do this as bar cookies. They taste the same. People actually seem to like them just fine that way, so why not do it the easy way? I'm just gonna keep this simple. I'm following the recipe on the back of the chocolate chip bag. It worked really well last time, and everybody liked it, so why mess with something good? The only modifications I'm making to this recipe are, instead of sweet cream butter, I'm using Earth Balance, which is a vegan butter. And in place of the large eggs, I am using flax eggs that are made from ground up flax seeds and water. Grind them, mix them in a 1/4 cup of water, let it gel, and those become my eggs. Simple. Lasagna is done, cookies are in the oven, yogurt's in the thing, beans are almost done, and now I'm going to whip out some cornbread, get that in the oven, and I've got tea that is steeping, and it should be good. It's been here for probably a couple of hours for my guys when they get home. I should probably go ahead and put this in the fridge. Yeah, we'll do that. Okay, let me get this cornbread going, and then I actually have a butternut squash that I need to cook up as well. I'm gonna cook this on the stove. I was doing some cleaning downstairs and I knocked it off, and so it got a crack, so it's gotta be cooked. I had forgotten all about these butternut squash. I am making cornbread from the corn that we ground, the popcorn that we ground. We just grind it in our Nutrimil grinder. Making a double recipe that it's just what I do, although we don't really need a double recipe because right now it's my husband and me and Andrew who's home. Austin is not here and Adam is out of town, so we're gonna have extra cornbread, and I certainly hope it turns out better than last week's cornbread because that was a disaster. I did not look at the labels on my jars, and I grabbed a jar that looked like I thought it was oat flour, and I do use oat flour for many things, but it was not oat flour, and I used a whole cup of guar gum, and that turned into a sticky, gooey mess. It was a disaster, a true disaster. So no guar gum in this one this time. In many of your recipes, you can change them to plant-based or vegan just by substituting eggs and a plant-based milk. That's really about all the substitutions needed. I'm just going to do this very simply. I'm just going to cook it in the pressure cooker with some salt, and that is that. And then I'm going to puree it, so I'm not even going to take the peelings off. I've washed it, and when I puree it, the peelings should also break down if I cook it properly. So that's what I'm gonna do. Here's those cookies. They just came out and they're looking pretty yummy. Here's the lasagna. And it's looking pretty good too. It's still bubbling a little bit. And it will thicken up a little bit as it sets. Let's cook the squash. And I gotta go run up the hill to turn the water off before I have overflowing water tanks. Looks like I cooked and pureed the squash without you, but here is the final result, and I'm just putting it into a pan here to serve. Before serving, I did add 1 can of coconut milk to give it some creaminess. I didn't show this part, but when the yogurt was finished, I went ahead and strained it into another jar so that I had most of the solids in one part and then the whey in another. And I can use this whey for other things like, I guess, just drinking. It has a lot of probiotics in it, and it looks like it has some herbs floating in it as well. But it's also good if I use some of this to start the next batch, but I would be a little bit cautious because it might water it down a little bit. So my best bet is just taking about a half a cup of this and starting the next batch. But I have used this in the past. It just makes it a little bit more runny. Well, that was fun. Thank you for sticking around to the end if you did. And I will just tell you, I don't usually do all that much cooking in one day, but that was really kind of a day where I got on a roll and had a lot to do. And I'm really glad that I did, because a lot of those things have lasted through the week. And so we've been eating on the lasagna and the cornbread, and the cookies are still there. And I've been able to share some with our kids, and it's just been a blessing to be in a kitchen where things are working, and it's not the RV kitchen. So thank you. You don't understand the blessing unless you've lived this path, but I appreciate you coming along. Please subscribe, share this with another person, and have a great day.